So this is a story that is very near and dear to my heart, and one that is actually depressing me greatly. So I found out today, after getting home from my new job, which I'll explain in a different video, EA is apparently shutting down Visceral Games. Now, Visceral Games is known for making the series Dead Space more than anything, one of my favorite franchises of the last generation. I loved absolutely everything about Dead Space. I thought that it was an incredibly fascinating world with a beautiful blend of the original Alien created by Ridley Scott and a blend of John Carpenter's The Thing. I loved the dark science fiction feel to it, and I loved that the character's name was Isaac Clarke, a spin on Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov, two very famous science fiction writers. I thought that everything about this world was incredibly fleshed out, incredibly realized, and felt incredibly lived in. The game, if you couldn't tell from all the Incredibles I'm using, I thought was frankly incredible. It scared the bejesus out of me when I was really young, and I have probably some of the fondest memories of that game. Dead Space 2, without a doubt, was one of the most pulse-pounding adventures that I ever went on. If Dead Space 1 was Alien, then Dead Space 2 was Aliens. And then Dead Space 3 was Alien Resurrection, but, you know, the less said about that, the better. But, actually, we are going to go into a bit of Dead Space 3 in this video. So, before we continue on with that, what has actually happened? So, EA shuts down Visceral Games. I found this out, actually, on Kotaku, and I'll pull up the little link here, and we're going to look at it. So, it says here that EA is shutting down Visceral Games, the studio behind games like Battlefield Hardline and Dead Space. Forgot they made Battlefield Hardline. The game wasn't too great. The publisher said today. The Star Wars game in development at Visceral will be revamped and moved to a different studio, EA says, although it will be something completely different. Now, before I continue onward, that is really depressing. One, Visceral Games, again, made Dead Space, which I thought was fantastic. But outside of that, this has got to be like the 9th or 10th studio that Electronic Arts has closed down. And quite frankly, they're running out of studios at this point. And not only that, but their reasoning behind these closures they don't make sense. And the way they're doing their games by this point don't make economic sense. I want to bring up Dead Space 3 again before I actually continue in the article. I only did one paragraph and already want to rant to you, right? But when Dead Space 3 was being made, I remember them saying that they had to sell 5 million copies in order for them to make a profit. That's an absurdly high number of game sales. Now, Dead Space 1 had a niche following at best. It's a horror game. These horror games never really make a ton of money, but that's okay because Dead Space made some kind of profit. Dead Space 2 made some kind of profit. It upped the budget, but it still made some kind of money, regardless of whether or not it was all the money like EA has been trying to do by chasing after Activision's heels for forever. Now, Dead Space 3 was just a dumb decision. They upped the production value a ton, and by upping the production value a ton, they had to sell more copies. And here's the kicker, right? They tried turning Dead Space 3 into more of an action-based shooter with microtransactions, and that was why the budget had to be increased. So, horror games generally don't cost as much as big-budget AAA titles because you're not trying to do as much. You're not having as many crazy explosions and particle effects flying everywhere, and you don't need all these crazy assets that go here, there, and do all sorts of wacky stuff. Generally, horror games are a lot more confined, they're a lot more claustrophobic, so you don't need all these vast open spaces. You don't need to take the time to worry about open worlds or big budget explosions with crazy sound design and thousands of voice actors, or whatever the case may be. Generally, it's like 5 voice actors on a screen at any given time, because there's probably only like 5 characters, and by the end of the story, there's only going to be like 1 or 2. So, EA ups the production value of Dead Space 3 because they want to make it more of an action game. However, this also means that they need to sell more copies to break even on their action game that they had already made. So, Dead Space 3 ended up making no money because EA thought that it would dump more money into it to cater to an audience that it didn't have. Brain dead, right? Simply stupid. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. It's another Electronic Arts decision. Dead Space was one of the few horror games that we had left. Now, horror games have been making a significant rise with releases like Slender and Soma and, you know, Alien Isolation and I think I said Slender already, but you know, all these Amnesia: The Dark Descent, you know, all these different, or I might have said that too, but anyway. All these games that have been coming out are games that are revitalizing the genre, but before that, we really only had Dead Space. Resident Evil had gone the route of being a shooter thing as well. And they were all chasing after a slice of that Call of Duty pie. But the thing that Electronic Arts and Capcom and all these other dumb publishers don't understand is that that market was already held by Call of Duty. And it didn't matter what kind of rendition of Call of Duty you tried to make, they had Call of Duty. Audiences had Call of Duty. People who were picking up Dragon Age or Dead Space or whatever these games may be were because they wanted to play Dragon Age games, Resident Evil games, or Dead Space games. They wanted to play a game fit in that genre that they were supposed to be catered to. Dead Space was supposed to be a horror franchise. It wasn't supposed to be a horror shooter, it was supposed to be a horror franchise. Survival horror first, shooting mechanics second, and the entire game displayed that. Isaac Clarke stomped around like a big heavy spaceman. The shooting mechanics, while good, were nothing wild and action-packed and spectacular. It was supposed to feel slow and heavy to evoke that kind of atmosphere, to evoke a horror feel. If Isaac Clarke is doing backflips and diving forward and power sliding, then you're not going to actually feel afraid of anything that is happening in the game, and that's exactly what they did in Dead Space 3. And so Dead Space 3 didn't make any money. And so what happens when Dead Space 3 doesn't make any money? Well, they haven't made a game really since then, other than Battlefield Hardline, which made no fucking sense, because again, they were a horror studio. Why would you give them a Battlefield game? What? And of course, you know, when Dead Space 3 fails, they're like, well, we're putting Dead Space on ice, which pissed me off completely, right? So they're like, we're putting Dead Space on ice because, you know, people don't seem to enjoy the franchise. Well, no, that wasn't the case at all. You had a niche market, and you decided to forgo that niche market to try to go after, instead, Call of Duty. But that's old news, right? This happened back in, like, oh god, when did Dead Space 3 come out? I don't know, I'll Google it later, but it came out a long time ago, right? So now, after Dead Space 3's flop, Battlefield Hardline's flop, EA had given Visceral the task of making a new game, and they were given the Star Wars franchise. Now, that's awesome. I thought that if anyone was going to be able to make a great Star Wars game that was story-driven, it was going to be Visceral, because Dead Space had a fantastic story, had incredible lighting effects and graphical fidelity, like, the atmosphere was great. If anyone was fantastic at capturing a sense of atmosphere, it was Visceral Games. But, you know, of course, Visceral now is gone, and so we're not getting that Star Wars game. So anyway, it goes on to say, our Visceral studio has been developing an action-adventure title set in the Star Wars universe, EA's Patrick Soderlund said in a blog post. Anyway, it goes on to say, in its current form, it was shaping up to be a story-based linear adventure game. Throughout the development process, we had been testing the game concepts with players, listening to the feedback about what and how they want to play, and closely tracking fundamental shifts in the marketplace. It has become clear that to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, we need to pivot the design. Soderlund, that's going to be fun to say, added that Visceral will be ramping down and closing, and that we're in the midst of shifting as many of the team as possible to other projects and teams at EA. Now, EA had just done this. They just did this with BioWare, with after Mass Effect Andromeda. They just condensed and closed down a studio and threw all the poor developers to the wind into different studios, whatever, that belonged to EA, and it was sad to see, because no doubt tons of people got laid off because of Electronic Arts' incompetence again. And so now it's happening again, only this time is with Visceral, a company that has made 2 fantastic games out of 4. And the only reason those other 2 were good was because, again, one was a shooter, and the other tried to be a shooter. I can't grasp the incompetence that this company is run by. I hate Electronic Arts. Oh my god, I hate Electronic Arts. It's a terrible, terrible publishing company. Anyway, he says, lastly, he said, while we had originally expected this game to launch late in our fiscal year of 2019, we're now looking at a new time frame that we will announce and update in the future. So, I actually want to go back and talk about what they're saying with them testing feedback and everything like that. I can promise you it's focused and tested. Probably 13-year-old boys. Because, again, the game industry is caught in this idea that, like, the only people who play video games are the only ones that matter are these 14, 15-year-old kids that want Call of Duty. Or now, it's not Call of Duty, now it's probably Destiny. Right? Because that's now the pie that everybody's chasing after. After Borderlands, And then Destiny. Now everybody wants to do this stupid shoot and loot multiplayer bullshit that nobody cares about. And so now they're probably going to be throwing all of their eggs into whatever the hell that new project is that admittedly looks really pretty, but I don't think is actually going to produce us anything significant. It just looked pretty, but that was it. And I'm sure it's going to be a flop because it's just chasing after, you know, Destiny. I don't even know what to say. I really don't. I genuinely don't know what to say by this point. Like, it's laughable how just dumb this company is. Oh, well, we focus tested the game and found out that people aren't really interested in the linear campaign despite the success of The Witcher 3, despite the success of Skyrim, despite the success of The Last of Us, despite the success of BioShock Infinite, and all these other great single-player games. And I don't think people want a strong single-player narrative in the Star Wars universe. Really, EA? What was one of the biggest complaints that people had about with Star Wars Battlefront, the original? Was that it didn't, or your shitty rendition of it, not the actual original Battlefront that did actually have a storyline. What were they complaining about? Well, aside from the fact that you gave them very few maps to play from and spoon-fed them content, they were complaining that there's no story. But now you're honestly going to sit here and go, there's not really a market for story-driven games. No, that's not the case. The thing is that Electronic Arts, again, wants all of the pie. They keep trying to get that killer app. They keep trying to get this genre-defining experience without just allowing their games to succeed where they wouldn't naturally succeed. And this isn't even the most brain-dead. They've made so many brain-dead decisions in so short a span of time. The microtransactions in Battlefront 2. Battlefront 1 that they made was also really stupid. What else have they done just recently that, like, also just was like, what? Why? Battlefield and Titanfall 2. You're gonna have your games cannibalize each other? You're gonna divide the market in half? We're gonna release Battlefield 1 and Titanfall 2 within a week of each other. And of course everyone was gonna go with, Battlefield, the game that everybody knew about. But then they had literally this amazing game that nobody touched, or very few people touched, because the last one unfortunately didn't have a lot in it. But Titanfall 2 improved on literally everything that Titanfall 1 had in every single way. And you had this fantastic game that got no marketing coverage really, that got released around the exact same time and in the exact same week as Battlefield 1. The only reason they and Call of Duty. The only reason why they released those games was because they were trying to compete with Call of Duty, but that was the only reason behind it. That was their only... And so they threw away a perfectly good game. They just threw it away. They just kind of wanted to dent Call of Duty sales, so they kind of were just like, we'll just release this game also. Maybe it'll hurt Call of Duty's pocket, right? Maybe it'll hurt Activision a little bit. Maybe if we throw enough darts, one of these will stick. But they're releasing in the same time frame. Doesn't matter. One of them will stick. Because the problem is that EA, I think, knew that Titanfall 2 wasn't going to have a chance. So they just didn't really care what happened to it because it was going up against their own juggernaut, Battlefield 1. And I don't actually think that Respawn is owned by EA. I'll have to double check it, but either way, whether they are or they're not, they've been treated like shit at this company. You know, Titanfall has not gotten the love that it deserves at all. And so that's just another brain dead decision. Anyway, I've had a friend tell me that I jump all over the place in terms of conversation speaking points, so I'm going to try to hone this back in on what Visceral is saying right now. So, they continue to say, let's see, it was updated in an email to employees obtained by Kotaku. Soderlund offered more details on the Star Wars game, which was codenamed Ragtag. The development team from across worldwide studios will take over development of Ragtag, led by EA Vancouver team that has already been working on the project. Steve Anthony will lead this team, and we will use much of the work that has been done to date by Visceral. The assets of Ragtag that have already been built will be the foundation of this new game. Steve Anthony is an executive producer at Electronic Arts. It's safe to presume that the new incarnations of the Star Wars game will involve games as a service elements, as EA has mandated for quite some time now. EA was not clear about the status of the longtime Uncharted director Amy Hennig, who joined Visceral to direct this Star Wars game after she left Naughty Dog in early 2014. In an email, an EA spokesperson said, "We are in discussion with Amy about her next move. I'd been hearing rumors for quite some time now that Visceral's Star Wars game was in trouble, and that studios across EA were brought in to help give it vision and direction. Now, that game is no more." So, it's safe to assume that after reading this article that EA is going to go the same route as they are with whatever the fuck the new game is called. I can't even be bothered to look it up right now, but I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. It's not Vanguard. It's something. It's whatever it's called. But, I mean, what else is there to be said, right? Electronic Arts does it again, and now they axe a great game studio, and they probably lay off hundreds or dozens of people, and it's sad. It's sad to see another great developer go, and again by Electronic Arts. And it's sad to see another franchise just disappear. Like, why? What are you actually trying to accomplish, Electronic Arts? What are you actually doing? Oh my gosh, I should have like recorded my face for this or something, because I feel like you guys probably want to see me like scream and rant and freak out, because I'm screaming and ranting and freaking out. Anyway, Electronic Arts strikes again. They're doing dumb shit. The sky is blue, right? All we can do now is wait to see what this new Star Wars game is that it's gonna be. I'm gonna do a segment on games as a service. I'm gonna do more segments on microtransactions, and fuck Star Wars Battlefront 2 and all that stupid shit that it's doing now with its dumb microtransaction system. Like, I had hopes for that game. I really did. I really, really did. But they're just incompetent. It's an incompetent company. I'm never gonna get a review code for Electronic Arts now if this channel does get big. It'll never happen after this video. But you know what? That's okay. Fuck Electronic Arts. This company just pisses me off. Anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on it. What did you guys think? Did you enjoy this little rant? I just found out, and I had to jump on as soon as I found out about this. So, comment below. Tell me what you think. Let's talk about it, and I'll see you all around next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.
The rebels will think twice before daring to attack these yards again.